Hi, everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Adrienne Keyser, and I'm your over 50s fashion diva. Here on my channel, we talk about fashion, of course, but also beauty, lifestyle, travel, and anything trending in social media and any of those topics. So if you want to stay relevant over 50, then you've come to the right place. Now, if this is your first time here, welcome. I am glad that you decided to join me on a Saturday movie night. Here in Belize, there's not a lot to do, very little to do, especially in my town. I live in the capital city, and there's literally only 3 lounges in the area. And they say it's not safe for ladies to go to on their own at night. So I usually try to stay home on Saturday evenings. I will watch a movie and do some skincare. And so I thought it would be fun to do that with you guys live tonight. Yes, I will be doing my skincare, hence um, my little headband. And also I laid this wig a couple days ago. It needs to get a refresh. So apologies if it's looking a little ragged, but we're gonna keep it moving. Tonight we are going to be doing I should say that this is going to be a series that I am starting where I'm going to be doing fashion movie nights on Saturday evenings. If it is something that's successful, I will continue it. Tonight we are going to be doing my favorite designer, Alexander McQueen. He is my hands down favorite designer of all time. And you're going to find out why tonight. He's incredible. He's amazing. And I thought it would be fun to kick off the series with Alexander McQueen since he is, again, my favorite designer. Before I get started, a little water. I am going to jump off camera. I know I do this to you guys every time I do a live, but I am going to jump off camera for just a moment. I want to wash my hands. I want to get some, let's see, what do I want to call it? Some adult grape juice for the movie and maybe a quick snack to go along with the movie as well. But mostly I just want to be able to wash my hands. And the first skincare product that we're going to be using, the second, actually is stored in the refrigerator. So I do need to run and grab that. So I just need literally 1 minute and I will be right back as soon as I wash my hands, gather up everything, and I'll be right back. Okay, be back, guys. Just one more thing. Be right back. Be right back. All right, I'm all set up. I'll probably get a snack a little bit later in the video, but for now, I am ready to go. I've got all the product that I need out of the refrigerator, as well as my adult grape juice that I'll be having off camera because the algorithm does not like the beverages. So I will be doing that off camera. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just starting all of my devices here.
I didn't understand that.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just starting all of I'm going loud, loud, loud. Okay. One more. Are you gonna go? It's not gonna go. Okay. All right. iPad's not gonna go with me. Let's get started. So the first product I'm going to put on is the Ordinary. Hopefully you can see that. This is like crazy hyaluronic. Let's see, what is it called? This is the AHA 30% plus BHA 2% peeling solution. This has to sit on for 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get that on really quickly. And I did just wash my hands, so everything's nice and clean. We're going to just get that on. I have to set a timer for this because it's lethal. You don't want to leave this on longer than 10 minutes. And be careful getting it around your eyes. It's basically a peel for the skin. We get that all over. I'm actually using the monitor to put this on. Don't forget the neck. And we are across the lips, good to go. Let me get a wipe here and get this movie started. Okay, how far are we in? 7 minutes in. Let's get the movie going. I've got it all set up and ready this time. Not too much fumbling around. This is on a channel called Understitch. I actually started watching a few minutes of it and I was like, oh, wait, I really want to do this live. So here we go. Oh, darn. I forgot to share. I swear I'm going to get good at this, y'all. I promise. I promise. I'm going to get good at it. I am going to get good at it. Here we go.
Alexander McQueen is a legend. We all know him and we all think we know his life story. But as you'll find out, he may have been brilliant, talented, and loving to his family, but he was also cruel, dismissive, and especially towards the end, did some truly awful things to people that he didn't even know. Since his death, his memory has been flanderized by the people that own his company, and even his family have spoken up repeatedly about trying to remember him as being a person, not some reductive idea of a tortured artist. This video is largely informed by these books, these documentaries, and I also contacted several people that knew him personally. All sources will be in the top left corner, and extra facts will be on the screen, so you're welcome to pause to read if you're interested, but do be aware that potentially triggering topics will be discussed throughout.
This is one of the reasons why I wanted to watch hers. It's because she actually has spoken with people that
would want
knew
a 5-hour-long biography of Alexander McQueen on this platform. It's on Patreon, but I don't like having
Sorry, I don't know what happened. You guys are buffering. Hang on.
especially because of their shared interest in Ron's family's Scottish roots and Scottish history in general. However, unlike his mother, Lee's father largely ignored him.
Okay.
Which actually really wasn't Ronald's fault.
I'm just,
You see,
I
his
thought I
father had
closed up
actually
enough
suffered a
windows,
breakdown
but obviously not. I'm just going to close out a
in
few more windows
1969,
and rewind.
the same year that Lee was born, from
Okay, guys, I'm not sure what happened there. It did a weird thing. It was buffering. I was trying to close out windows so that I wouldn't lose you guys in the process. But in doing so, I lost you guys in the process. So what I was trying to say is that I rewound it back a little bit in the movie so that you guys aren't missing anything. I apologize. This is my first time that that's ever happened with StreamYard. So I am taken aback a little bit, but I will know in the future because, as you guys know, all my lives are pretty new to me. So I'm still learning as I go. I still have 6 minutes and 50 seconds left on my mask. So we really didn't lose that much time. It was literally just a few seconds. But anyway, yeah, I just rewound it back a little bit so you guys didn't miss anything. So let's just go ahead and continue. We're going to present. Here we go. So here we are. We really didn't miss anything. Let's start from the beginning. Okay, now it's looking like, okay, we got it. I do have it up on my large TV, so I knew when it was buffering. All right, let's get going.
Lee Alexander McQueen is a legend. We all know him and we all think we know his life story. But as you'll find out,
I
he
need a
may
great
have been
juice
brilliant,
break.
talented, and loving to his family, but he was also so cruel, dismissive, and especially towards the end, did some truly awful things to people that he didn't either, people that own his company, and even his family have spoken up repeatedly about trying to remember him for being a person of a tortured artist. This video was largely informed by these books, these documentaries, and I also contacted several people that knew him personally. All sources will be in the top left corner, and extra facts will be on the screen, so you're welcome to pause to read if you're interested, but do be aware that potentially triggering topics will be discussed throughout.
Oh,
This video is about a fifth of the length of the full version. It's shortened because I wasn't sure if anyone would want a 5-hour-long biography of Alexander McQueen on this platform. It's on Patreon, but I don't like having paywall exclusive content. So if there is something you would like to see in the future, or perhaps even read in a book, do comment to let me know. And if I think it's possible to not ruin my channel in the algorithm, I'll release it here.
I heard
So,
that says.
Lee Alexander McQueen. Siblings Janet, Anthony, Michael, Tracy, and Jacqueline. In his early years, Lee was very close to his mother, especially because of their shared interest in Ron's family's Scottish roots and Scottish history in general. However, unlike his mother, Lee's father largely ignored him, which, though that is negatively framed in most books, it actually really wasn't Ronald's fault. You see, his father had actually suffered a breakdown in 1969, the same year that Lee was born, from overworking. And according to Tony, it became so bad that Joyce ultimately had to get someone round the house to institutionalize Ronald in Cane Hill Hospital.
1969,
Obviously,
same
he
year I
couldn't
was
work
born.
following this, and so money was in extremely short supply, hence why they were so cash poor when Lee was born. It's also likely for this reason that shortly after Lee was born, the family would move several times, Firstly, to a simple home at 43 Shifford Path in Lewisham, London, then quickly
think we're
moved
like
again to
6 months
Burdett
apart.
Road in Stepney in the East End, and again to a block of flats on Biggerstaff Road in Stratford, which was still quite a rough place to live just because it was recovering from the devastation of being hit by a V-1 flying bomb during the Blitz of World War II. During this time, according to Joyce herself, Ronald was putting in an enormous amount of effort into getting better. He took up calming hobbies and eventually rejoined the workforce as a taxi driver, to firstly try to earn a little bit more money to make ends meet, and secondly not to overwork himself again. Janet, Tony, and Michael, too, would leave education to go into work to help out the family. Janet as an office worker for a dried egg import business, Tony as a bricklayer, and Michael as a taxi driver. And certainly times were a little easier after the three had jobs, especially considering both boys went into trade professions which Ronald saw as steady and reliable, looking down on anything creative as it was exactly the opposite, though that never stopped Lee, who claims he started drawing at 3 years old and never stopped. At the age of 5, Lee enrolled at Carpenter's Road Primary School, and it was here that his creativity would truly flourish. In fact, it was already in primary school that McQueen first announced that he wanted to be a fashion designer, already attempting to make clothes for his sisters, having strong opinions about what he wanted to wear to school, and furnishing his bedroom wall with a picture of Calvin Klein. In fact, it was this early on that large parts of McQueen's personality developed as well. On the positive side, Lee would grow to be very social, playing outside a lot, and by the time he was 6, while on a family trip to Pontins, Lee would discover his sexuality after he fancied the boy that was competing against him in the Prince of Pontins competition. While on the negative side, after Lee damaged his teeth permanently after falling onto a wall playing outside, he would develop a deep-rooted insecurity about his appearance which persisted throughout his life, especially after he messed up a dive later at the age of 9, again which smashed his teeth, but this time so badly that they caused him incurable, horrible tooth pain. But while this is noted as a true point of difficulty throughout his life, his developing physical insecurities were far from the worst thing that happened to a 6-year-old Lee McQueen. In the same year, 1975, his sister Janet would marry a man named Terence Anthony Hullier, who would go on to have horrific and irreversible negative effects on Lee's life. Janet recalls that in front of Lee, he would strangle her, hit her to the point that she lost 2 pregnancies, and once Lee even almost saw his sister be strangled to death. However, unfortunately, Terence's abuse did not stop at Janet.
I love how
When
she
Lee was
puts
around
in
the age of
corner
9,
the
Terence
reference
began
point
sexually abusing
of where
Lee.
she's getting each reference.
We don't know all the details of this. Lee kept that incredibly close to his chest, and Janet certainly was not aware, but we do know that Terence's abuse would go on for many years, evolving into actual rape by the time that McQueen was 11, at which time he enrolled into Rockaby Comprehensive School, where he was teased for being gay. Naturally, he started cutting school and really not paying attention in lessons. He hated being in education, in fact. Instead, he would find solace in his extensive list of hobbies, including,
My
aside
time's
from
up. I'll
enjoying
be
his
back.
genealogical research
He was
with his
gonna go
mother,
rinse
he was
this
often
off. I'll
found
be right
drawing
back.
dresses, researching the careers of famous fashion designers, researching fashion history in general, playing with their family dog Shane. He also enjoyed working with his friends at a pub nearby the school gates named Reflections. He enjoyed going to church because he enjoyed gospel singing. He grew an interest in birds, joining the Young Ornithologist Club of Great Britain and went twitching on the roof of a neighboring block of flats. He also grew an interest in synchronized swimming, joined the swimming team, and even represented his school in national competitions. When he wasn't in swimming lessons, reading, or twitching, most evenings after school were spent in a nearby pie and mash shop with his friends, or going to the back of a local engineering firm near the River Lee, where he and his friends would kiss and fool around with a string of girls, hang out, and smoke Embassy No. 1s. So, Lee, despite the sexual abuse at home and bullying at school, had a very active and filled childhood with great friends and a close family. However, while most of the family remained close-knit, the abuse Lee was suffering in secret from Terence had not subsided, and unfortunately, at the same time as all of this, Lee had also started to become sexually abused by his teacher as well. Naturally, this started to directly affect his social behavior, with his friend Jason Meakin specifically remembering that Lee became increasingly hot-tempered in these years. But luckily for everybody involved, on the 27th of May 1985, just as Lee was freshly 16, Terence died. He had left the house to go and get the morning newspaper, leaving his wife Janet and his 2 sons at home, when during the drive, Terence suffered a massive heart attack due to his diabetes insulin clogging his arteries, lost control of the car, and ran into a nearby house. The 35-year-old was taken to Old Church Hospital in Romford, where he later died. Furthermore, in the same year, Lee left Rokeby, and the abuse that he suffered at the hands of his teacher is just never mentioned again in any book, so I assume that also stopped at this time.
So, now likely free from abusers and out of compulsory education, the world was Lee's oyster. Which is why it's rather surprising that from here, despite hating school with a passion, he continued his education with evening sewing and fashion classes in a local technical college named West Ham Technical College that he attended starting September 1985, for which at the end of the school year, he presented some of his designs in his very first featured catwalk show.
However, despite his enthusiasm towards fashion, the idea of continuing into a fashion career was very far from Lee's mind. Not only because it wasn't a trade, but also because he wasn't yet very good at sewing and showed very little sign of natural talent. But because Lee was a perfectionist and knew this was a skill he wanted to work on, when one afternoon in 1986, his mother and Lee were watching a TV program about how the art of tailoring was dying and that there was a shortage of apprenticeships on the esteemed Savile Row, Joyce turned to her son and encouraged him to go down there and try just to see what they say. A probably throwaway comment that we know now catalyzed his entire career.
I'm just going to do a quick pause for the cause. This is actually where I ended watching it the first time. I just wanted to let you know that I did do a little rinse off of The Ordinary. But before I did anything, I had just gotten out of the shower an hour ago. I wanted to have a nice fresh shower for the movie tonight. And I did wash my face with my Awaken Collagen Cleansing Foam. I've done videos on that product. It's absolutely amazing. Now that all of The Ordinary is rinsed off, I'm going to just go in really quickly with my simple micellar water and some cotton rounds. And I promise you, I'm not going to be stopping the movie every time I put on a new product. I'm just going to hold up the product and let you guys see what I'm doing. But I just have forgotten to tell you about what I had done prior to the movie, prior to going live. So I wanted to go ahead and give you that information to let you know that the skin was nice and clean right before I went live. So that's why I jumped right in with my peel. I would never start with that before cleaning my face, obviously. So this is just to make sure I got all the peel off my micellar water. Then I'm going to go in with my second mask for tonight, which is going to be my Glam Glow Gravity Mud Mask. This is a peeling mask. It's one of my favorite. This is what she looks like. And I'm going to go ahead and apply that. Again, I'm not going to waste any more time with the movie. I'm going to hold up things as I use them, and we're just going to keep on keeping on. The mud mask, that's going to stay on for at least 15 minutes before I can peel it off. So we will go ahead and get that started. Continuing with the movie, here we go.
Lee made his way to Savile Row with hardly any qualifications and a low sewing skill. But fortunately, because it was easier to train from scratch than to retrain, Lee fit the bill of what the esteemed tailors Anderson and Shepherd were looking for, and so head salesman Norman Horsey gave Lee a job just on the spot.
All the best designers.
Here, he worked extremely diligently, determined and self-disciplined, arriving on time and leaving later than required. It was boring and the environment was homophobic, forcing the 18-year-old to learn to code switch, But Lee soon found that he enjoyed garment construction and he was particularly adept at learning kinesthetically. However, not too long after he finished his training and was permitted to work on their high-profile customers, including Michael Gorbachev and Prince Charles, he began to show up late to work, not getting his tasks done on time, and generally just being unreliable. By mid-1987, they were concerned and sent someone to his house on Bickerstaff Road. But McQueen was so offended that they came to his house that rather unexpectedly, he just quit. There are actually a lot of reasons given by McQueen as to why he said that he left, but the most accepted reason was that his mother had been taken ill and that he was taking the time to look after her. Anderson and Shepard themselves have since said that they wish that he had told them because they would have just given him a week off for it. But by this point, by the time that they found out, he'd already left. It was just too late. Yet, despite this less than favorable exit, Lee had now his purpose. So, to continue with his studies, he visited Gives and Hawkes on Savile Row and started working here on the 11th of January 1988, but only really stayed just for over a year, leaving on the 17th of March 1989 after he also experienced homophobia here. It was at this point that, according to Detmar Blow's book, McQueen went to see Wendy Dagworthy, then the head of fashion at Central St. Martin's, who McQueen asked for help with selling his own clothing. But she turned him down and instead suggested he enrolled as a student. If this is true, it provides insight into the motivation of McQueen from here onwards to both go into commerce and to run his own business. But it's actually very hard to verify this, as most books say that he was not interested in having his own business at this time.
Instead, it's more likely he went through a string of smaller jobs holding two at a time, including a return to his old job at Reflections to supplement his freelance work for costumiers Berman and Nathans, and then a little while later with the designer Koji Tatsuno, who ran a fashion label called Culture Shock, and as a pattern maker and cutter under the designer John McKittrick at the brand Red or Dead.
However, after Culture Shock went bust and Lee was forced to look for alternative employment, John selflessly pulled out his book of contacts and told McQueen to go to Milan to find work. The biggest designer in the Milan scene at that time was named Romeo Gigli. And though McQueen didn't necessarily rate his design work, he really admired the business that he had created and the innovations that he had made in the industry. So he felt there was something to be learned from him, and naturally he was hired due to his impressive CV, with Lee beginning working for Spring-Summer 91 for the company, splitting his time between the studio in Milan and the factory in Novara. Quickly, he learned factory skills and the art of how to construct and maintain a public image from Gigli, and yet despite his skill development and the fun that he was having on the gay scene in Milan, his time at the company was extremely short-lived, and he was sent back to London in August 1990, only 5 months after he arrived in Milan. Lee returned to London lacking a clear direction. He returned to John McKittrick as a machinist and cutter, this time at his own namesake label for their next season, Autumn-Winter 91, where John would realize an incredible change in Lee. Lee had become extremely curious about all the different aspects that went into his design work, specifically not just the technical aspect of garment construction that he had been so well studied in previously. McKittrick was obviously very happy to answer all of Lee's questions, but he knew he wasn't the best educator for Lee's young mind and suggested him to go back to school as a teacher and gave him the name of Bobby Hilson, who was running the master's program at Central St. Martin's at the time. Lee quickly went to visit Bobby in the St. Martin's building, whipped out the clothes that he had made, and because she was impressed with the quality, she asked him to come back the following day with some of his drawings. When he returned, Bobby told him that all of his accumulated work experience would be the equivalent of a bachelor's degree, and now with the knowledge of how unique his drawings were, she would be more than happy to offer him a place on the master's course if he could afford it. Fortunately, his paternal aunt Renee Holland had come into a small inheritance after the death of her father Samuel McQueen in 1986, and because she had worked in the rag trade herself, this was her kind of poetic way to pay that forward. As a result, Lee became the first student ever admitted to Central St. Martin's from a non-traditional route. the first to be admitted without credentials or going through the proper channels. And it showed. Due to his lack of formal education, he would make a lot of social faux pas, such as speaking up in class, interrupting guest speakers, being aggressive in his attitudes, and being a generally difficult person to be with, not really understanding the hierarchy of school. Teachers and students alike complained about his behavior to Bobby Hilson, but after the complaints fell on deaf ears, they just took to bullying McQueen themselves.
This is why
This
he
bullying
became a legend.
literally never subsided, and even on the day of the final show on the 16th of March 1992, the now head of the MA course, Louise Wilson, whipped out a bottle of perfume, sprayed McQueen dead in the face, and yelled, "You fucking stink," to which he fell to the ground with perfume in his eyes and called her a C-word. The collection presented with
Oh,
Joyce
wow.
and her sister-in-law Renee in the audience, and he graduated. Not with a distinction, but with a pass, just like everyone else. As a result, it didn't really look like there was much of a chance of Lee getting a job after this, and no one had inquired of him in that manner immediately after the show, which is usually what students with talent can expect. However, luckily for Lee, there was one very well-trained eye in the audience. Isabella Blow, who at this point was an editor for British Vogue, was
Isabella Blow.
unrelenting in her desire to support him in any way she could. She hunted down his contact details, and after her excessive contact attempts after the show, somewhere in the region of 6 to 10 calls per day to Lee's mother, Joyce, eventually Lee sold her almost the entire collection for around £5,000, which is around £10,000 today, after which he seemed to try to go back to ignoring her. Instead, he contacted Alice Smith and Cressida Pye at Denza, a fashion recruitment agency, who would help him get interviews with Alberta Ferretti, Maison Margiela, Jean-Paul Gaultier, and Jill Sander, though none of these panned out. It was really only because of this lack of an ability to find work that he would eventually come back to seeing Isabella as a possibility. And she worked for free, getting him more freelance work. She promoted McQueen's name around London. They together chose to use the name Alexander McQueen instead of Lee. She convinced British Vogue to feature McQueen over a few pages in the November issue. She convinced Hamish Bowles, by then an editor of American Vogue, to visit Lee in Tooting Bec when he was in town, and even moved Lee rent-free to her mother-in-law's unused house of 33 Alderney Street in Pimlico so that he would have a more accessible hub for future visits. Though by that summer he'd already moved out after being quite the menace to his housemates, instead moving into university friend Simon Ungus's two-story house at 169 Lessington Avenue, where he finally had the time and the space to create utterly unencumbered. McQueen was in a real flurry of inspiration. He literally took the kitchen door off its hinges and turned it into a print table and turned anything and everything nearby into clothing. This is how the infamous bumster trousers were originally made in 1992 for Lee's friend and drag artist Trixie Belair, and in fact the creative importance of this and the rest of the created clothes were so obvious that those around him convinced him to use them as his first collection. Though, with that acquiescence, the question then became how on earth he could afford it. You see, while the state of London fashion had become so bad that the whole idea of London Fashion Week was dying, to present in London Fashion Week, even if just in the showrooms, was still expensive. However, luckily, because all of the big names had jumped ship to another fashion capital in season prior, the British Fashion Council was almost forced to give spots in the presentation stage of London Fashion Week away in order to bring interest back. Obviously, McQueen was one of these 6 designers that was given a spot, and because Isabella drew in Sarah Mower, Nilgan Yusuf of the Sunday Times, and Hamish Bowles, the collection was a runaway success
and clearly creatively the biggest success of the 6 designers.
To celebrate, McQueen and his friends went down to Soho, where they bumped into John McKittrick before they moved up to Charing Cross to visit a club in the basement of the pub named Man Stink, leaving the collection outside in black sacks as a way to avoid paying the cloakroom fee. When leaving, McQueen and friends forgot the collection that was next to the rubbish bin, and when they rushed over the next morning, it had already been taken by the rubbish bin men and would never be seen again.
Good Lord.
But that almost didn't matter, The success had been had, and everyone around McQueen was elated.
Yay.
McQueen's mum, aunt, and sisters were all now fully behind his business, but unfortunately, his father just didn't see the potential in it and still wanted him to get a proper job with wages. And quite frankly, McQueen was also not convinced he was on the right path either, though McQueen's opinion was quick to change after his following show was such a huge hit that it launched McQueen into the big leagues of fashion, and he was almost forced to acquiesce that this was the path he was on. And yet, still officially unemployed, he didn't have a bank account, was living hand to mouth, and it seems that sometime around this time, he had started to have suicidal thoughts, something that would just never truly leave him.
Wow.
Furthermore, due
started
to his
that
lack
early.
of finances and because Simon Unglis wanted to move in with his boyfriend, McQueen moved into a ground floor flat that his sister Jackie owned in a Dagenham housing estate in Spring Close in Chadwell Heath. Though because that was too far out of London, a recently disinherited Isabella illegally moved him into her mother-in-law's house at 67 Elizabeth Street, where he would move in together with his new boyfriend, Andrew Groves, who Lee had only recently met around the time of autumn-winter 94, Banshee. Lee and Andrew's relationship was seriously fast. Within only months of meeting, Andrew had become Lee's machinist. They moved in together, they had been on a surfing holiday to South Wales, they began performing in drag together as a pantomime cow, and they both would regularly go to see Joyce, Lee's mother, in her Biggerstaff Road house. However, it was also in the summer of 94 that his friend Billy Boy would recall that McQueen would now become more unpleasant when under the influence, teasing Billy Boy about suicide, which he knew Billy Boy had lost both his parents to. Later, Billy Boy would come to understand that Lee was just goading him into falling out, something that had become common since his time at CSM, according to his friends there, and later this was attributed to McQueen's personal insecurities with his appearance and also with his father's acceptance of his homosexuality. Insecurities that were obviously worsening with his increasing fame and had now begun to affect his romantic life as well. You see, soon after they began dating, Andrew and Lee had put a deposit down on a rented flat in Hackney, and while they waited to move in, they were living in Andrew's flat on Green Lanes. They had no money, no electricity, no hot water, no furniture, and heating only in one room, so it wasn't necessarily the easiest situation for any new couple to live in. But they fought quite constantly, and increasingly their fights became more nasty and more physical, punching, throwing doors, and they would increasingly frequent sex clubs individually.
Okay.
At first, Groves really didn't understand why McQueen's behavior had worsened like this, but eventually he understood as well that Lee was hitting out at those he was closest to after Lee had a bit of a breakdown in which he explained that he was sexually abused by somebody in his family and that it had happened repeatedly in his childhood. He cried for half an hour and never mentioned it to Groves again, evidencing some really deep-rooted trauma from Terence and from his teacher that unfortunately would just never be worked through, leaving Andrew just to get the brunt of this resulting behavior. This obviously heavily affected their relationship, and as a result, Lee spent increasingly less time at home and more time in the new Clerkenwell workshop. However, this meant that his team were now subjected to a changing Lee, and he soon received a reputation for being a bit of a difficult boss, something that he also wasn't shy of expressing in the press either. And yet, despite his changing personality in private and his growing discontent with the fashion system in the public eye, McQueen became increasingly respected as an artist, leading him to bring in his performance art interest to his design work. In short, he was about to provide a fashion show performance art experience that was impossible to be indifferent about. However, while he may have set out to cause controversy, and he was obviously successful, forcing McQueen to genuinely become famous after autumn-winter 95 Highland Rape, he quickly learned that he did not have control over the imagined narrative that the media could create. This caused him to go through a very tough period where he lost his sense of self quite quickly, He slept with a woman for the first time, and he confided in friend Chris Bird that he was seriously considering just leaving fashion altogether.
I didn't know that.
Fame quickly changed McQueen, and he became addicted to it. Stylist Katie England said Lee became increasingly demanding, forcing team members to action his ideas even if the task was literally impossible. Janet Fishgren, Alice Smith, and Chris Bird all concurred, with Janet saying that this new height of fame had inflated his ego even more than it already was, and now because of his fame, people had to listen to him. They had to at least try to perform these ridiculous tasks. While Chris said that it was because of who he was and who he believed that he was that he got away with it, which just encouraged him to be worse, and he soon grew temperamental and volatile. In a way, now he had become Alexander
no, he's not a
McQueen,
Pisces.
and he was no longer Lee. Most people in his life even stopped calling him Lee, including his mother, though he begged her to stop. And contrastingly, calling him Lee started to become pretentious, which just fueled the fire of him becoming a truly new person. Plus, his MO of baiting those he was closest to fight also only worsened. Isabella, who'd given McQueen literally everything she had, got the brunt of this, as McQueen didn't care at all that Isabella and Detmar had become homeless after a series of family deaths and 3 failed rounds of IVF, instead choosing just to ignore her or even mock her for her situation, knowingly abandoning her in her time of need.
Was such an amazing
McQueen and Andrew had also had several bust-ups and now ended up not moving into the flat that they had put a deposit down on previously, and instead McQueen ended up moving into a basement loft alone in Geller House on 51 Hoxton Square. Meanwhile, even his family had started to voice their concerns over his financial state,
And it certainly hadn't helped that Ronald McQueen, Alexander McQueen's father, had recently been diagnosed with cancer.
However, despite their resignations, by this point, at least to those in the industry, it was very clear that he was on the brink of legendary success, and it was this desire to succeed that kept him chasing after it, somewhat giving use to his well-recorded delusional sense of grandeur. He wanted to become the best designer ever. He wanted eternal success. He wanted to be addicted to it. But this desire now did not include Isabella.
Yeah.
The truth is, McQueen realized she couldn't help him in his business anymore. He no longer needed her help with promotion or with sales, and so her role at the company was downsized. She kept on with him at a personal level, but now at elbow's length. So while they were presented as inseparable in the press, he'd become more demanding and more bullisome, while simultaneously juxtaposing these cruelties with expressions of emphatic love for her in a way that was very clearly abusive.
I am going to pause right here because I do have to say that in the end, he really did treat her dirty. He really did do her dirty. I mean, you talk about a lot of people he did dirty. Doing that to Isabella really kind of hurt my heart. That is how I was introduced to Alexander McQueen, was through interviews with Isabella Blow. Before Isabella Blow, I had never even heard of McQueen. It was really her promotion of him that got him to where he was. And in the end, he really he cut her out. He did her dirty. I mean, she put up places for him to stay, gave him the high life of luxury and excess, all the things that he wanted. She was there for him. And yeah, he really did do her dirty. I don't know if this narrator is going to get further into that story, but I did want to just pause in case she doesn't, to just kind of interject my opinion about the way that he treated Isabella Blow. It was really quite painful for her in her life and in her career, till the point where, you know, she held on to that pain up to her death, and how he treated her. And yeah, I just felt it was really a crappy deal that he treated her that way. All right, on with the movie. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I really am. I will say that most of this story I did already know. I just wanted to bring it to you guys so that you kind of know where I'm coming from as far as my fashion sensibilities come from and my fashion taste. A lot of it does stem from Alexander McQueen. And that is to say that I love the beauty of fashion, but more so, I love the art of fashion and being avant garde and something never seen before, something outrageous, something unique. That is what I look for in fashion. So McQueen really does just fit the bill. He's like my beacon of designers when it comes to fashion style. I really do take a page out of his book every time I put a look together, because even if it's something sweet and precious and pink and frilly, I always have to have some edge to it. And that is McQueen's influence on my fashion styling. So there we go. Enough about me. Let's get on to this movie.
Money had changed McQueen, and he had become someone that his old friends simply couldn't recognize anymore. His social life had taken a major turn, and he was hanging out with major celebrities like Goldie, Bjork, Naomi Campbell, and Kate Moss. Though most of his original friends thought that these people only stuck around for the party and didn't actually care about him as a person. Also, they facilitated his increased drinking and his increased drug use, which, though was a problem before, because he had been able to compartmentalize so well, it really hadn't affected his business. However, even that turned a corner when he brought some cocaine into the studio to help everyone sew.
I mean,
So
especially Kate
incredibly,
Moss. I mean,
because he was
she
so
was
good
such
at
a big drug addict.
compartmentalizing, outside
So
of
I'm
work
sure he
and
did
outside
drugs
of his
with her a
partying,
lot.
his romantic life had actually taken a very positive swing after he met a new boyfriend named Murray Arthur, and they had quite the opposite relationship to Andrew Gross before, helping his now regular suicidal thoughts to subside.
Another person he did dirty.
The pair met on the 13th of July,
Sadly.
1996, while at a party given by friend Lee Copperweed in his flat on Cheshire Street just off of Brick Lane. McQueen had had a few drinks and was relaxing from his usual shy self when he began making eyes at a man across the room. Murray was a little more gone than McQueen, though, and dashed to the bathroom to vomit. Noticing this, McQueen followed him outside, helped him vomit further, and simply just took care of him. They got to talking, and McQueen learned that Murray had recently moved to London from Scotland, something that was of particular interest to McQueen, who was already obsessed with Scottish history from his own Scottish roots. Naturally,
Now,
the
that's
pair
just
went
a
back to McQueen's
weird way to
apartment
meet
and spent
somebody
the evening together.
and then become your
The next day,
partner.
McQueen gifted Murray his Paul Smith branded
Everyone
watch
has a
and used
story.
it as an
Everyone has a
excuse
past.
to set up another date. Meanwhile, his professional career was also about to take a huge upturn after LVMH called to offer him the head designer role at Givenchy around 4
Givenchy.
months before Spring/Summer '97. Though he actually at this time just told him that he would have to think about it. He didn't rate Givenchy as a designer and thought John had bastardized the name of Givenchy in his year there.
Yeah.
But they were persistent. They called repeatedly, sent him all sorts of gifts in the hope of convincing him, and it wasn't long before Daniel Piette at LVMH started calling Trina Vercade personally
It was
as
actually when he got to
Eventually,
Givenchy
and quite
that I
unexpectedly,
was
on
really
Tuesday,
paying
October
attention
7th,
to him.
he turned them
And I
down
was like, this
because he
guy's
just
going to
simply
be a
didn't want the
legend.
job. He was rather indifferent to it, and he didn't care about the ridiculous sum of money that they were offering. But then he slept on it, and the next morning he got in contact with Detmar Blow's lawyer, John Banks, to begin making negotiations. John arrived that evening, and LVMH sent over a draft contract, which included a section about buying the McQueen brand, though that was immediately rejected.
Rejected.
They got on the phone and negotiated up to around £450,000
Like, I'm not
for
selling
a
my name.
2-year contract, and eventually booked a contract signing on the 9th of October. But it did not go smoothly. Bernard Arnault called McQueen a horse, which obviously didn't go down too well. They offered to buy the Alexander McQueen business again, though he was now not willing to sell. And at one point, Alexander became so worked up that he had to go to the bathroom to calm down, only for Isabella to call as she had locked herself out of their friend's apartment and needed them to get a locksmith for her right at that moment. But as they returned to run through the documents, Isabella then burst through the door, disrupting the very important negotiations. Needless to say, the event was a complete kerfuffle, but McQueen did eventually sign a contracted salary of $160,000 per year, which at the time would have been somewhere around £300,000. A huge sum, sure, but a pittance of the $1 million that his rival, or unofficial rival, John Galliano, was earning at Dior. Alexander, now back in London, had only 5 days to put together his creative team to add to the current team of 60 employed at Givenchy Couture, and he knew who he would pick, but one noticeable absent name was Isabella Blow. She just didn't know it yet. In regards to why, there were many rumors, but most believe this was down to Alexander's jealousy of Isabella's wandering eye for talent after he told the press that she couldn't be his muse because she had too many proteges. Namely, by this point, she had Philip Tracy, Reva Cigar, Julia McDonald, the models Sophie Dahl and Stella Tennant, amongst many others. But what really upset Isabella wasn't just the fact that she didn't get the job. The real slight was that she had been replaced. As a muse by Annabelle Nielsen, then wife of Nat Rothschild and someone she introduced McQueen to but had grown to become the most important female figure in McQueen's life, a fact Isabella told Daphne Guinness that was her worst introduction ever made, and as a stylist by Katie England. Katie was Isabella's younger rival, and to be replaced by her made her feel very insecure and, quite frankly, used.
Yeah.
But she couldn't let him go. Isabella was now penniless. She had lost all the things that he had gained and was terrified that the door would close even further right when she needed it most. And unfortunately for Isabella, while money had changed him before, this was quite significantly more money, and he became quite significantly more changed.
Yes.
If there were any remnants left of the old, shy Lee, it was certainly gone now. He was the imperial genius with friends on the payroll and more pressure and drugs than anyone could possibly handle, even with tables of cocaine backstage at the shows for common use.
In fact, this was so much money that with his first paycheck from Givenchy alone,
Alexander finally paid back the money his aunt Renee had lent him to go to Central St. Martin 6 years earlier. He started looking for a new London home, soon finding one on 9 Coleman Fields, Islington in London, completing the purchase a little later by the 17th of December 1996 for £260,000, but spending thousands more on renovations, including a huge TV and an aquarium wall in the dining room. He offered to buy his parents a new home, though they declined, saying that they liked the neighborhood. He finally got his teeth fixed properly this time, though he still had a lot of deep-rooted insecurities that this could not fix, and he finally got the approval from his father that he had wanted his entire life. Though this began a new fear in Alexander, that his father was accepting of his homosexuality only from his rise to fame and money. However, while he feared that his father was using him, Givenchy had a far more evidenced level of negligence towards McQueen. You see, Givenchy had provided him an apartment for himself and for his team when in Paris. It was 3 floors up, it was small, had a lot of noise from the outside, and was in particularly unkempt condition. So, because it was so undesirable to McQueen and his team, they treated it as such, leaving cigarette butts, used tissues, ice cream pots, and mildewed clothing wherever they fell. Even staff members at Givenchy were surprised to see where they had dumped their most important asset. But unfortunately, this really was just the tip of the negligence iceberg. Bernard Arnault didn't attend his shows. He changed parts of his collection that he didn't like without speaking to him, and refused to speak in English with McQueen despite being totally fluent, treating him very much like a second to Galliano. He was outright neglected at work by Bernard Arnault, but McQueen was like a child trying to impress a neglectful father. He would do whatever he could, only to then break down in private because he was so sensitive about it. It's really this that fueled his increasingly unhealthy choices. Ever heavier drug usage, cocaine and ecstasy at all times of day and night, drinking to excess, firing those that would even mention it. Even sleep became a luxury that he could not permit himself much of, instead spending his nights haunted by creativity that he wasn't afforded to stop, regardless of how much he wanted to. Because the thing is, Alexander McQueen was now a fully fledged celebrity, and he needed cocaine to afford the unceasing demands made of him. In just the few days after his debut,
Spring-summer 97 Haute Couture,
he had countless interviews, client appointments. Patsy Kensit commissioned a wedding dress for her marriage to Liam Gallagher.
Sorry, one more pause really quickly. Just wanted to say that I did look up his date of birth, and I don't know why I thought that we were 6 months apart. We're more like 6 weeks apart. He is very much a Pisces. He is very volatile, very artistic. That's what we are. We are those types of people. So yeah, I don't know why. Maybe it was his death. I think his death was in September. It was like right at the beginning of Fashion Week, Fall Fashion Week, or Summer Fashion Week. I remember that day like no other. But yeah, I did just now. I looked it up. He was born on March 17th. They may have said it earlier in the video, but yeah, we're only about 6 weeks apart from each other. So he would be the same age as me. He would be 55 today if he were still alive. And yeah, just wanted to pause there to say that this has a lot to do with his personality and the way he is. He's very, what do they call it? Like that starving artist, kind of very emotional. Pisces were very emotional people, very artistic people. And so it all makes way more sense when you get an idea of the fact that he was a Pisces. And if you know, you know. All right, let's keep going.
He finally moved house with Murray. On the 25th, he walked in Ray Kawakubo's Autumn/Winter 97 menswear line. On the 27th, he showed his collection, It's a Jungle Out There. And on the 12th of March, showed his debut, Givenchy ready-to-wear collection. It was a total whirlwind, and yet no one was treating him in a way that bequeathed someone of his influence. And it wasn't just his bosses. Notable examples of industry insiders treating him poorly were Kate Moss and Naomi Campbell, who were not yet his friends, but Michael Ungless remembered treating him particularly disrespectfully. Even publicly, things weren't any better. His friend Anne Dagneau remembers specifically from 1996 through to 1999, Lee was all but bullied by the media for his, quote, British vulgarity. His
That's
appearance, the
amazing
brutalist
that
nature
him
of
and
his
Kate
manners,
Moss
and the
were
provocative
close
nature of
friends.
his work,
And
which
Naomi
was
Campbell,
often
they were
called
all doing drugs at
misogynistic,
that time.
that was only made
in the
worse when
90s.
McQueen clapped back, giving them more material of the brutish behavior that they accused him of. However, with that said, his public persona wasn't solidly negative,
I'm gonna
but
start
more
steaming my
polarized.
face.
He was either hot
Starting my
or
steamer.
not, misogynistic or for strong women, the pride of England or a national embarrassment, causing for him to be both simultaneously big-headed, believing the hype, and becoming jaded from the lack of control that he had. Plus, unbeknownst to the public, LVMH was having the same controlling stance over Alexander as he was projecting onto his friends and colleagues. They instructed him on where he could go, who he could see. He was no longer allowed to gay pubs and sex clubs, no more prostitutes, no more drag queens, and certainly no friends from the old days. As might be expected, this had a profound influence on McQueen personally, and most noticed a huge change in his behavior. He was now chain-smoking. He spent a great deal of time getting cocaine or Valium deliveries, even to the point that he overdosed on it accidentally, but was found in time by a flatmate who described him as blue. And yet,
Jesus.
with all of their opinions on what he did and who he saw, Givenchy didn't seem to care about his drug use. Because if he's under that much pressure and it kept him going, it served a purpose.
Yeah.
However, really, the purpose that it was serving for Givenchy was only mooted by their inability to let him be creative, which meant that, unluckily for McQueen, the effect of this creative gilded cage was blamed on him. He had all the pressure to be shocking and to be provocative and to make sales without the freedom to be.
It was all about
Eventually,
money.
he became at a tipping point, and it became so toxic that rumors had begun that he would be fired.
When he stopped
As a
making
result,
money, they wanted
Alexander
him
just
out.
changed. He became more corporate and focused, yes, in Givenchy, but more noticeably in Alexander McQueen, where he would just regularly discuss salability and strategy, which, at least to LVMH's delight, worked.
By the second couture show, named Eclect Descent, it was clear that this new manner had helped him hit a real stride.
The collection was a hit, both technically because he had already mastered the new techniques taught to him by the atelier, but also creatively, as the theatrics were remembered as equally as the fashion.
Amazing.
McQueen's reputation, therefore, was completely through the roof. He won his second Designer of the Year award from the British Fashion Council in 1997, and even those at Givenchy had started to take him seriously because of all the press that he drummed up.
Yep.
Leslie Johnson, then ready-to-wear director of Givenchy, forced the heads, in fact, to treat him better and got him a better place to live on the Rue de Brac and even got him a company car and driver. He, of course, still hated it. The clients looked down on him. He was still in his gilded cage, and frankly, he wasn't treated as well as Galliano was being treated at Dior.
With their endless budgets and resources, despite him being technically more capable than John.
So even though he was doing incredibly well in the public eye, that didn't actually help anything behind the
Him
scenes.
and John always had a
Meanwhile,
rival.
in his love
which is
life,
crazy.
things were just
They were
equally
both
as
so
conflicting.
talented.
His once glorious relationship with Murray had become extremely strained. Murray had stopped working for Alexander McQueen and had found it difficult to find another job. But he'd still been overspending for some time, and his overdraft amounted to more than his yearly salary.
They were just doing
Then,
crazy
one evening
drugs.
towards the end of 1997, they had a screaming row over the phone, and Murray took a mixture of pills, vodka, and gin. He overdosed that night in their home, but incredibly mid-overdose, he came round long enough to see Alexander's dog Minter stood over him, who convinced him to call an ambulance, and luckily he did survive. But McQueen was livid. He didn't want to talk to Murray after that and had taken it personally that Murray would do something like this, telling Chris Bird, his friend, how dare he try to kill himself in my fucking house.
In my house, right.
Murray left for Scotland soon after, going from everything to nothing. In the same month, September 1997, while Murray was still away but still technically dating McQueen, Lee met a new man named Archie Reed in a club on West Central Street, London, named The End. He was blonde, good-looking, he'd been married, and even had a daughter when they spent the evening together. Alexander and Archie were together in a somewhat unofficial capacity from that point onwards for about 12 years on and off, sometimes even with years in between, but becoming arguably the romantic relationship that defined McQueen's love life. It was never an exclusive relationship, but Archie believes he knew McQueen better than anyone, and it's very likely that he did. There was a connection between McQueen and Reed that was unlike anything he'd ever known before. Archie effectively offered McQueen a perfect blend of freedom and stability. Though, of course, because the relationship wasn't exclusive, he soon began to see other men, including a porn star named Paul Stagg, and in April 1998, he met a 25-year-old named Richard Brett, with whom he had a very one-sided relationship. You see, while Brett was more indifferent, McQueen would pour himself onto the 25-year-old, confiding in him about the sexual abuse he suffered from Terence and his teacher. Though interestingly, he also confided in Billy Boy and Detmar Blow around this same time as well, who each said that it helped contextualize his often self-destructive nature. You see, despite those around him telling him endlessly how much they admired his work and the fact that he did truly believe them, he could still find no compensation for his personal insecurity, which meant that his sexual abuse trauma would just continue to eat away at him while he did no psychological work to overcome it and instead continued to use it to inspire collections that were regularly lauded. Which meant that as the shows gained him constant
One of the
praise
best
over
shows
and
ever,
over again,
best fashion
and an
moment in history
ever-increasing
right here,
fame with it,
with
McQueen's
Shalom
anxiety around shows growingly worsened, affecting his behavior awfully before each show. However, this wasn't McQueen's only personal trouble.
Greatest moment
You
in
see,
fashion
much to McQueen's jealous fears,
history right here.
Isabella had found herself a new replacement for McQueen in Jeremy Scott,
Jeremy
who she
Scott.
championed from spring-summer 99, something that
him.
Isabella knew would cause paranoia
Gonna
in
probably
Alexander
would try to
and
do a
used
movie
it
on
to
Jeremy
taunt
Scott
him
also.
thusly.
And Galliano.
As a result, Alexander felt even more insecure. He asked Richard to move in with him, and 6 months later, Alexander proposed. Brett turned him down, of course. Gay marriage wasn't legal yet, and Brett, still only half in the relationship, felt that he was too young. By the spring of 99, Alexander realized of his own volition that something was just intrinsically wrong. He looked himself in the mirror, realized he was just not happy, and decided that he should do something about it before his 30th birthday. However, this actually didn't manifest introspectively, healing his past wounds. Instead, throughout 99, McQueen just began obsessing over becoming skinny through the use of diets, exercise, and liposuction. This also played into the fear of the dip, which is that point in a creator's success where they reach the pinnacle and start sliding downwards. This, of course, is an inevitability for all creators, but McQueen, being fearful of this, had conflated his idea of losing weight with being a marketable person like Ralph Lauren or Calvin Klein, who marketed themselves as much as they did their clothes.
Look at John
And
Galliano
therefore,
on the end.
he bound
looking
the
crazy.
idea of his
That's
career
mommy, eh?
success
Yeah.
with the desire to be brandable, which in his head
That's a bizarre
just translated
photo
to
of
skinny.
Galliano.
Though this soon caused yet another awful spiral back into overeating fatty foods and foods in the carbohydrate food group, excessive drinking, and also excessive drugs, to a point that this time almost killed him after a trip to Spain with his assistant Annabelle Nilsson and new friends Kate Moss and Naomi Campbell, in which Moss found McQueen blue on the floor of the bathroom. By the autumn, Richard's discomfort had not subsided. Alexander had become controlling, and Richard felt a loss of his own identity. They broke up, and McQueen had a brief fling with a man named Jay Mascaret before he found a new beau in George Forsyth around the February of the year 2000. George and McQueen could talk for hours, and again McQueen unloaded onto George all of the difficulties he was having. George describes McQueen's friendship group as incestuous, cliquey, and rampageous in their drinking and drug habits that would go on for days on end while never expressing concern for their actual problems, namely McQueen's escalating mood swings that most of his old friends just thought were an early sign of mental illness, but was shrugged off as an eccentricity or blamed on the absence of his pre-fame friends. But while Givenchy and Alexander McQueen tolerated it, it's thought that this was a factor as to why in April of 2000, McQueen approached Marianne Tesler, then the president of Givenchy, with the idea of selling them a stake in his own label. Surprisingly, considering they tried so hard to get a stake previously, they turned him down. But it was this, and the knowledge that Domenico De Sole and Tom Ford over at the newly formed Gucci Group had freshly received $2.5 billion to spend on fashion companies to grow their portfolio, that led him to consider to take his business elsewhere. He'd also met De Sole at a party in either May or June 2000, and they also got on, taking a picture together to send to Bernard as a kind of threat or mockery of Arnault's recent failed takeover bid of Gucci. Meanwhile, in his personal life, by late July, early August of 2000, McQueen had asked George Forsyth to marry him, and unlike Richard Brett, Forsyth said yes. A New Age priest performed the ceremony under a full moon on a 3-story yacht in Mallorca, and the pair exchanged wedding bands engraved with their names before the newlyweds and guests moved on to the after party of £20,000 of champagne and lobster. In attendance were bridesmaids Kate Moss and Annabelle Nilsson, Sadie and Jude Law, Noel Gallagher, Meg Matthews, Patsy Kensit, Nellie Hooper, Karen Mudler, but notably no family were present at all. And multiple sources claim it not to have had the serious vibe of a legitimate wedding, leaving many to speculate that this was just an excuse to party, drink, and take a lot of drugs.
Take a lot of drugs.
Unfortunately, this was also experienced by George, who Jude Law found sitting alone and noticed how uncomfortable he looked. He asked him if he knew anyone at the party at all,
Jude Law.
and he didn't. And several friends soon noticed how their relationship after the wedding devolved between giant gestures of romance and base domestic violence. Archie Reed, McQueen's long-term boyfriend, who Alexander was still with at the time of the wedding, thought the wedding was only done in spite, evidencing McQueen's true unhappiness with everyone and everything in his life, including his own namesake fashion house. Because in truth, he was desperate to leave the industry. His Givenchy contract was coming to an end in 2001, and he'd fulfilled all his wildest dreams with a business that could run effectively without him, thanks largely to Sarah Burton.
Yay!
However, just at this moment, just as he was about to leave fashion forever, he received a call from Isabella Blow, who had some news that he could not ignore. Tom Ford wanted Gucci to buy a stake in Alexander McQueen. Naturally, it didn't take too long for him to
That's why
contemplate,
you know
and only 6
the
months
name
after
Alexander
meeting
McQueen
de
has
Soleil,
to do with
on the
Gucci
2nd of
Group.
December 2000, he sold 51% of the Alexander McQueen company to the Gucci Group for a reported $25 million, though this figure is well debated. Alexander
would not
could
be
finally
famous
see
if
the
it weren't
light
for Gucci
at the
Group.
end of the LVMH tunnel, but that could not remedy his internal struggles. He was hungover most days and had grown a tolerance from drugs, meaning he was now asking for harder and harder substances that he couldn't get without a prescription. He was also having regular panic attacks, as the stress of fame, paired with Bernard Arnault's constant jabs in the press, only added to the paranoia that everyone around him was just using him for his fame and money. As a resolve, McQueen just started to spend his newly increased wealth on major shopping sprees across the world, on a new home in Essex for his parents, and for himself, a Georgian house on Victoria Park in East London, where he and Forsyth planned to raise a family. In June 2001, McQueen paid $1.3 million for 11 Aberdeen Park, and another few months after that, purchased a £340,000 home named the Old Granary on Warren Lane, Fairlight, 3 miles east of Hastings. However, his aforementioned plan for a family with George didn't last too long, as around the time of his Spring-Summer 02 Ready-to-Wear show, he broke up with his husband because Forsyth had asked McQueen for money to pay his mortgage, and McQueen saw that as a sign that George only wanted him for his fame and money. McQueen thus spent more time with Archie Reed, started serial dating again, and became increasingly more paranoid, believing that he was being raped during the night by a ghost, which led him to set up film cameras to ensure he wasn't molested while he slept. At some point in the year, he also contracted HIV, something truly devastating to a man that had grown up during the AIDS epidemic and had always been very concerned about sexual health. His weight issues also worsened. In the press, he started to claim that he was eating healthy, taking diet pills, doing yoga and power walking, but of course none of that was true. He'd lost weight by getting a gastric band fitted and kept it off with a £600 per day drug consumption, taking his appetite. So, while everything conceivable was going right for McQueen on the surface, excellent sales, good reviews, and even in 2003, a CBE, the undercurrent behind all of that was very dark.
A CBE.
And unfortunately for Alexander,
huge.
Things were only about to get worse.
United by the
You
Queen.
see, these pressures had now expanded not only to his workload, but also
He was
to
on
his
his
personal
way
life.
to becoming
His mother
knight,
had recently
a
had
sir.
kidney failure, for which she was on dialysis thrice a week, and his HIV status was also weighing heavy, causing him to reveal his secret to his family, who were devastated by the news. Fortunately, and perhaps because of this fear, around this time, McQueen himself would notice again just how destructive his life had become. His addictions and his behavior was not something he wanted to put up with anymore. He personally made several attempts to get clean with professional help, including a stint in a rehabilitation clinic in California, though unfortunately this didn't work, and his drug use instead just got worse, forcing his staff to accommodate his increasing addictions, even requesting drug rooms for when he was on press tours, refusing to show up if that need was not met. This also affected his romantic life, evidenced by new beau Glenn Andrew Tew,
But
who he
never
met in the
his
autumn
art.
of 2004,
Never
but
affected
again,
his
McQueen
work.
was just really paranoid throughout, this time forcing Glenn to
That's
spend
what
beyond
made him
his
a
means
legend.
on gifts for Alexander to prove his devotion. He'd regularly throw Glenn out the house, sometimes spending months without talking to each other, and McQueen once even hired a private detective to follow Glenn when he was away in New York because McQueen just didn't trust him. As a whole, the relationship was mostly just fueled by a shared love of drugs, specifically cocaine, alcohol, and sleeping pills, which they would mix together to create a particularly potent poison that certainly did not help his developing mental struggles. In fact, it's actually likely because of his declining mental health that McQueen wasn't able to notice the sharper mental decline of his friend Isabella, who was still being held at arm's length. You see, while he and Daphne Guinness had paid for her to have stays at various mental hospitals, she had been growingly suicidal, erratic, and had been diagnosed with both bipolar, depression, and ovarian cancer, which meant that she would never be able to have the children that she had long dreamed of. Hoping to repair their distance, Isabella invited McQueen to Hills for a weekend together. She prepared endlessly for it, hanging a portrait of McQueen in the Great Hall, allowing 2 of his friends and his dogs to come. She arranged for elaborate and expensive food to be present and for them to go to view houses together as an activity. But when McQueen arrived, he spent most of the time in his room taking drugs with his friends. He didn't eat the food she prepared at all and asked the chef to just prepare some uncooked cheese.
I told
He didn't
you.
go on her excursion, and he
Did her
didn't
dirty.
even realize how bad Isabella's situation had become because she had finally stopped discussing suicide. A good sign in his mind, but this trip hurt Izzy more than he could have ever imagined,
Did her
leaving
dirty.
Detmar to say that this was her last straw, evidenced as she changed her will shortly after to remove McQueen. Soon after, on the 5th of May 2007, she announced that she would go shopping, but instead trailed into the garden with a jug of paraquat weed killer and glugged down the liquid. Contrary to how her death is often hyperbolized, Isabella's death was slow as she sat in bed for 2 days in a hospital in Gloucester waiting to die. In the years after her death, a plethora of stories would be told inflating the glamour of her death. But in truth, she died at the age of 48 in a public hospital,
God.
dressed in cotton,
So
on a
young.
drip.
Oh my God, so young. 48. I mean, I'm 55. That's just
McQueen was
heartbreaking.
inconsolable at Isabella's funeral. Detmar said he was sobbing his eyes out, and Daphne remembers him looking broken. He blamed himself for her sense of loneliness,
He did
and he
wear
was quoted saying that he wished
on
he
his
could
hip.
have done more. On
In
October
his head.
5th, 2007, he debuted his self-condemnation and grief in La Dame Bleue, Spring-Summer 08,
Yeah.
which was a show dedicated to Isabella's
Isabella.
memory,
Yes.
praising her for everything she had given him and taking his bow with her other muse, Philip Tracy.
Yeah.
Almost immediately after the
Such
show,
an amazing
McQueen
show.
boarded a plane to Kerala, India with Glenn Tew, still then his boyfriend, for some soul-searching. Glenn remained there for only about a week before traveling to Australia for his grandmother's birthday, while McQueen went to Bhutan to meet up with his old friend Sean Lean. Here, he would learn the basics of Buddhism and found solace in Buddhism's central tenets, which helped him deal with his immense grief over Isabella's passing and with his own inner struggles. When he returned to London in November 2007, he took a taxi from Heathrow to Soho to visit Glenn, handed him a set of Buddhist prayer beads, and broke off their toxic relationship. This certainly was a major breakthrough in his life. He'd finally found a new optimism for life, and that came with a string of positives. Gucci agreed to a pay rise in April 2008 to the tune of £10 million per annum. He bought his sister Janet a home next to his, and he found himself a new home in Mayfair on a significantly more quiet street than his Hackney home. But unfortunately, this period of freedom and peace was not to last. Firstly, his beloved dog Minter contracted cancer, and then on November 6, 2008, Michael, Alexander's brother, had a massive heart attack in Heathrow and died in his taxi before fortunately being defibrillated back to life. However, as it happened, with McQueen's new interest in the Buddhist idea of rebirth, this then fed an unhealthy interest in what lies beyond death, and he began asking his brother endless questions about what he saw. By the end of the year, for an undisclosed reason,
That's a
Archie
really
and Alexander
interesting
decided
fact.
to
I
separate
didn't
for the
realize
final
that.
time.
He was
And
asking
this,
his brother about
unfortunately, only worsened his feelings. Jackie McQueen was quoted saying that he started to fall down a very self-destructive path after this, and his other friends told that he discovered a new vice in crystal meth.
Jesus.
His mother, Joyce, his sister Janet,
I
and
didn't
some
know
of
that
McQueen's
either.
closer friends, including very notably Sebastian Pons, who tried endlessly to
I didn't
help
even
him,
know that meth was
became concerned
a
about
thing
his
then.
erratic behavior, while his brother Tony was now concerned about his extremely demanding work hours that saw him very rarely go home and sleep in a bed at the office. And yet, despite all of the family and friends' repeated attempts at contacting McQueen and contacting
One more pause, guys, just to say, if you were not aware, fashion designers have an incredible amount of pressure. These designers do about 6 collections a year, which is very taxing. I mean, if you think about the fact that they've got to sketch the design, they have to come up with the designs, sketch the designs, have them made, do the runway shows, all the marketing, and it's all about sales, and it's so much pressure for every collection, and then you've got haute couture in there. I mean, it's a mess, from cruise to haute couture to ready to wear fall seasons. I mean, it's insane. So the amount of pressure that he was under at that time was crazy. And he is basically living on drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes at this point. I mean, he's barely eating anything. It's totally insane that he was actually able to push out collection after collection, and each one was more spectacular, more amazing, more art. He never let in. It's like no matter what was going on in his life, the fashion was still incredible. That's what it's about. That's why he's a legend. Not just to me, but I mean, this woman right here said he was a legend. And it was because, in spite of all that was going on in his life, the fashion kept coming, the sales kept coming, the money kept rolling in. He was unstoppable when it came to his art. All right, I'm sorry. I had to interject that. So after my steam, I got my eye patches on, and then we're gonna finish up with moisturizer here in a little bit. All right, here we go.
Gucci as well to air their concerns.
I'm trying not
Later
to
that
talk too
month,
much so you
McQueen
guys
would
get
overdose on sleeping pills in June, and shortly after recovery, he would attempt again to take his life in July, this time overdosing on painkillers.
Contrary to what is believed now, in that McQueen was actively trying to take his own life at this time, at the time, his doctor, Dr. Perriera, believed that these attempts were just cries for help and prescribed him antidepressants that he only ended up taking for about a week. As it happened, it was not these pills that put a halt to his suicide attempts,
Because around the same time, Alexander's mother, Joyce, had kidney problems that were now worsening, and it became apparent that she would likely die from her condition. As a result, McQueen was forced to realize what his suicide would do to his mother, and he decided that he would stop attempting to commit it just to keep up appearances to make her final time less painful.
That was what
But he
did him
only
in.
planned this until after she passed.
Yeah, that's what did him in.
So he self-medicated with recreational drugs, which now caused him hallucinations in the form of flashing lights from underneath his bed, continued paranoia of a man sexually assaulting him while he slept. He lost the ability to care for his own HIV status and knowingly continued sexual experiences with HIV negative people without informing them of his status. By that Christmas, his mother was hospitalized, and it was clear that she was near the end. Knowing that his mother's time was nearing and his plan for after her death, he then visited Robert Paulet to ensure the future of his company in the event
I
of
think
his
that was Sarah
absence.
Burton in there
And
for a
he
second.
continued his work obligations by traveling to Milan for his Autumn-Winter 10 menswear show before returning, only to find that his mother's condition had worsened. On the 1st of February, while McQueen was at a dinner in honor of Tom Ford, his family was around her bed in the hospital. Hoping for the best, by around 11 or 12 at night, Michael and Ron went off to take their prescription medicine, which they'd left at home, and Janet drove them, leaving her son Tony alone with their mother. At midnight on the 2nd of February, Joyce began screaming aloud in the ward, obviously in true pain. The nurse gave her morphine, and she fell into death in Tony's arms.
That's what did him in. The death of his mom.
The
That
next
put
few
him
days are
over.
somewhat hazy in memory, but we know that between Wednesday the 3rd of February and Sunday the 7th of February,
And
McQueen
he
spent a decent amount of time with his family.
created her
By the
gravestone.
9th,
He
McQueen
designed
returned
it.
to work and even went out clubbing alone, but again with copious amounts of cocaine and
Oh, it
alcohol.
says it was designed by his brother.
By Wednesday
Gary.
the 10th, Alexander took his team to dinner, and later that evening he met up with Annabelle in his Green Street Mayfair flat, where they began to plan their annual March birthday trip together until 3 a.m. the following morning, when Annabelle made her exit, leaving McQueen alone in his apartment on the day before his mother's funeral.
I don't know. Like him and Tom
McQueen
Ford,
locked all the
I guess,
doors,
got along.
set up a scented candle,
He
and
couldn't get along
forced a
with
security
Galliano,
chain
but he got
onto the
along
front
with Tom
door.
Ford. I
He
don't
took a
know why.
substantial amount of cocaine, sleeping pills, and the painkiller/tranquilizer Medalazam, and he grabbed his copy of Wolf von Lekenwick's Descent of Man, on the back cover writing, "Please look after my dogs. Sorry, I love you, Lee. P.S. Bury me at the church."
Okay, sorry. I was talking through that really important part. So yeah, I just couldn't figure out, like, I knew that him and Galliano didn't get along, but I didn't realize that him and Tom Ford really did get along, and I guess that they were somewhat friends. I don't know what that relationship was truly about, but here's the most important part. Sorry, here we go.
The next few days are somewhat hazy in memory,
About how he died.
but we know that between Wednesday the 3rd of February and Sunday the 7th of February, McQueen spent a decent amount of time with his family. By the 9th, McQueen returned to work and even went out clubbing alone, but again with copious amounts of cocaine and alcohol. By Wednesday the 10th, Alexander took his team to dinner, and later that evening he met up with Annabelle in his Green Street Mayfair flat, where they began to plan their annual March birthday trip together until 3 a.m. the following morning, when Annabelle made her exit, leaving McQueen alone in his apartment on the day before his mother's funeral. McQueen locked all the doors, set up a scented candle, and forced a security chain onto the front door. He took a substantial amount of cocaine, sleeping pills, and the painkiller/tranquilizer Medalazam, and he grabbed his copy of Wolf von Lekenwick's Descent of Man, on the back cover writing, "Please look after my dogs. Sorry, I love you, Lee. P.S. Bury me at the church." From here, there is no exact chronology. It's clear that after 2 possible attempts at cutting his wrists with kitchen knives, he took the cord of his dressing gown and strung one end around his neck and the other around the shower. When that buckled under his weight, in his 4th attempt, he took his favorite brown leather belt, removed the clothes from the guest bedroom, and used the rail in the closet to hang himself, succeeding in the process. Approximately 5 or 6 hours later, at just before 10 o'clock, McQueen's housekeepers, César and Marlene, returned to work, finding McQueen's body hanging lifeless in the wardrobe. Immediately, César called McQueen's personal assistant, Kate Jones, who darted over to Green Street, where she met police and an ambulance crew who removed McQueen in a burgundy body bag, surrounded by reporters snapping pictures as his body was loaded into the car, which meant that, unfortunately for the family, most of them discovered the news after it had been broadcast to the world. However, this was not the end of his memory. This was not the end of his story. You see, within 24 hours, the company, Alexander McQueen, began to distance itself from the real person that was Lee Alexander McQueen. McQueen was a complicated person, as we have well discussed in this video. He was good and bad, talented and fearful, often cruel, but often wonderful. He'd been an openly gay man who enjoyed things like group sex, prostitutes, porn stars, illegal drugs, and was known to be horribly cruel and even physically violent to those who loved him best. But that was the problem. To PPR, he had always been both the company's greatest strength and their greatest liability. And now that he was dead, they were willing to spend millions to control the narrative. Specifically, Gucci hired Jonathan Code, a specialist in reputation management, to spearhead a campaign that led the narrative on McQueen's death to angelicize his memory. This included overseeing the removal of anything and everything in the front window of their shops, replacing that with an announcement of his death and an encouragement of fans to leave flowers and notes at the boutiques, welcoming several salutes to Alexander during New York Fashion Week that year, which he had died at the beginning of, and the MCQ diffusion line show that was ready for New York Fashion Week was cancelled.
So it wasn't the September,
Obviously,
it was the February
given the
show.
overtly positive memory that we have of Alexander McQueen today, these efforts have been wildly successful. But because of these efforts, today we have a flanderized memory of a man that was so talented that he couldn't take his own creativity and so took his own life. But this narrative actually just moves the blame of his suicide onto McQueen as a person and away from both the horrifically demanding work schedule, the sexual abuse that he had suffered from ages 9 to 16, and the fact that though the people around him knew that he was suffering and knew that he was suicidal, chose not to care. Even the McQueen family have spoken up about this several times, with Ron, Jackie, and Janet all questioning if the inactivity of those at both LVMH and the Gucci Group makes them culpable. Because though the family is sure that PPR acted within the law, they note a lack of compassion in the efforts to retain good public perception, with the example given that the family weren't allowed to see his Queen Street apartment nor choose any mementos to remember him by, as by the time they were permitted entry, it had all been boxed up and moved out for valuation by PPR. In fact, of the very few things they got, 2 came from the inquiry into his death, with Jackie taking the rail and Janet taking the belt that McQueen had used in his final acts. Even their private funeral, which was planned for the 25th of February 2010, was swiftly taken over by PPR. Their role was reduced to a family reading, and they ended up not knowing many people in attendance at all.
Wow.
Seemingly, the only part of his passing that they really had volition over was conducted towards the end of May 2010, when McQueen's sisters and Tony, but not Michael because he was recovering from a heart attack, and not Ron because he was also too sick from cancer, took a trip to Kilmuir Cemetery on the northern tip of the Isle of Skye to bury the cremated remains of their brother in the place he most wanted to be laid, while a Scottish piper played. Tony laid the urn, and everyone placed a handful of earth atop.
I didn't know all this part. You guys.
His public funeral, also hosted by PPR, was then held on September 20th, 2010, and 1,500 guests, many of whom celebrities, gathered at Sir Christopher Wren's church at the top of Ludgate Hill for the funeral. His family sat apart from the celebrities and models, and very noticeably felt out of place. 2 months later, his father was delivered a note on November 11th that his personal effects of your late son, which do not have monetary value, had been moved to a big yellow self-storage unit.
Wow.
Jackie and Janet were granted permission to visit and go through what PPR had decided wasn't worth selling, but things had been abandoned so long and cared for so badly that they cried when going through the very small selection of boxes and left feeling more empty and alone than ever before.
I didn't know all that. Wow.
Is it fair to entirely blame PPR for this? No, not entirely. Alexander McQueen was one of, if not the most financially successful luxury fashion companies to come out of the decade entirely. And from their perspective, that's an enormous asset that was at huge risk from his death. So damage control was really all they could do. But it's understandable why the family would feel so cut out, and why in the
That's
end,
at Isabella's
just
place,
left
by the
with
way.
a reductive
in
memory
Flying
of a
Hawks.
complicated person
He would
who
do
had
that
more to him
at
than a
Isabella's
simple narrative
family's
story.
estate.
Alexander McQueen was not just a brand. He was a person. A deeply troubled person, yes, but towards the end, there were few that were willing to see that, and there were few that were willing to help change that. I hope moving forward we can still remember McQueen as the true creative genius that he was, but that we understand that a great disservice was done to this man whom the creative industry as a whole, not just PPR, wrung dry by any means necessary.
See what I was
He gave
saying
us
earlier?
so much, but we returned that with too much money and too little humanity.
Wow.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for more videos like this one in the future. Check out my beauty channel Underskin for videos like this one, but about beauty brands. And a special thank you goes out to my patrons over on Patreon, some of whose names are on the screen now.
Okay. I mean, a lot of that story I knew. Some of it I didn't. I think that this creator did an incredible job. It was very thorough. There was a lot of stuff in there. Like, even I was saying, oh God, look at my wig. All right. Don't come for me. Anyway, I think that this creator did really good research, and I think that, you know, a lot of the stuff I did know, some of the things I didn't know. So she really was thorough. She was really thorough in covering his life. I think that it was an amazing story. I think that the fact that he was such a legend and that they basically bled him dry to the point that he couldn't even continue to create. He knew the life that he was facing. He knew that if he just continued, that they were going to literally bleed him dry. And he had to make a stand. I really do believe that the death of his mother played a huge role in what actually transpired in his life. But I think that it ultimately, the drugs killed him. It was his choices that he was making. He just thought he was unstoppable. He didn't think that anything like that could happen because he had been going that way for so long. He just kept increasing dosages and going crazy and thinking that, you know, he could just continue going. But in the end, he knew that if he didn't do something, that they were going to kill his art. And that is what he couldn't stand with. He couldn't stand for them completely destroying his craft. What he was the most passionate about was his art. And he knew that that was the road it was going in, and decided to take it another way. You know, again, it was a devastating day for me. I actually remember that day specifically because it was actually sent to me on a Facebook message. I mean, Facebook was still pretty much king at that point. Instagram was still fledgling and coming along, but everybody got messages on Facebook. And I remember that my sister sent me a message that day and told me about it. And I didn't believe her, because I was gearing up for Fashion Month. I mean, it was the beginning of New York Fashion Week, and everybody was looking forward to his collection, including myself. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty devastating that day to find out that he was it New York or Paris? Whichever city he was going to be showing in, I can't remember now, but it may have been Paris. It was literally like the beginning of Fashion Week, and everybody was really looking forward to his collection, and myself included. And just to know that they were going to show his collection without him being there was truly heartbreaking. That was so devastating. I mean, if anyone was affected by it more than anybody, that's what I'm trying to say. More than anyone, Sarah Burton was the most affected, because she basically had to step into the reins. It's not like he said, okay, you're going to be my successor. I mean, I think that maybe we'll have to do her story as well. but I don't think it went down that way. I think that, they had done the collection. The collection was done in the pan. It was ready to go. Maybe some tweaks here and there in the styling, but I think that the collection was pretty much done. And she had to present that collection that fashion week on her own without him, as she was grieving. I mean, to this day, I give my hat off to Sarah Burton, because not only was she put into a really devastating situation on the day that he died, she carried that house for years. And when she decided to leave the house and give it over to, or the company gave it over to Sean McGurr, I cried. I literally cried, because it was just like reliving Lee's death all over again, because she had held the reins at that house and continued his legacy to the point where who Alexander McQueen is. I mean, McQueen was a up and coming brand. She really tipped it over. She really made it the household name that it is today. So anyway, maybe we'll do her story, but I am going to wrap this up. Still got the eye patches on. So I'm going to go wash my hands. We're going to do the moisturizer. And I do have a little bit of a bonus video, which I found earlier today. And it just so happens to be my other favorite designer. I don't even know if he is been in the game long enough to have a whole documentary done on him, but we are going to do a little bit of a bonus video with Olivier Rousteing from Balmain. And again, it was a video that I found earlier today. It just popped up and I was like, ooh, maybe I can add it on to the video this evening. So I am going to, come on. I'm going to pop that up. It's a very short video. It's only 15 minutes. And so that will give me time to finish up my moisturizer while we finish up this video. So let's go ahead and we're going to start sharing. And if you know, Olivier is, since the death of Lee, Olivier has really filled his shoes. He is the designer that is my go-to, that I absolutely love everything about him. I love his creativity. I love his art. I love his edginess, his darkness. He's just incredible. This video is taking its sweet ass time to load. I'm going to go ahead and refresh so that we can get it started, because the eye patches are basically done. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my moisturizer, holding up each item as I go. Okay. Let's get this on full screen. And away we go.
Hi, it's Olivier Rousteing, and this is how I live with style.
Love him so much. I love him so much. This was such a cool video. I had to share it.
I think I bought this house.
I'm going to go
around
wash
10
my
years
hands. I'll be
ago.
back, guys.
It's been 8 years that I'm living here. Before, it was an old factory, and after it came almost like a spa, half of a spa, I would say. I felt completely numb. I knew I could do so many things, so I rebuilt almost the entire house. I really wanted to bring my style, my vision, the furnitures. I wanted to bring all the marble that I'm obsessed with. If you come with me, you will see this incredible lamp that I think represents completely who I am. I mean, you know me for Balmain, so I love the gold. I love the strength. In the lamp I found in Marché Saint-Ouen in Paris. It's a lamp that comes from the beginning of the century. It's a beautiful, beautiful execution, as you can see. You can see the stone of the amethyst that is in the wings. You know, it's really important because when you get in a house, I want to have a beautiful spirit and energy. And amethyst as a stone bring that really peaceful and serenity energy in the house. And when I want people to come in my house, I want that they feel really peaceful and calm. This house is 1,000 square meters in the middle of Paris.
Amethyst is
really
my
private.
birthstone.
It's really calm, as I told you. Should we head upstairs and take a look of the house? Come and follow me. On my way to upstairs, you would see, actually it's my portrait. I know it feels a bit megalomaniac, but it's not. It was an important photo shoot at the beginning of my career, and I wanted to celebrate the beginning of my journey at Barma. So this is a picture that was my profile. I mean, it was, I think, maybe 10 years ago. Sometimes, in life, we always forget the beginning. And for me, it's always important to remember where I come from and how the journey started. You will see this painting. I was with my friend, Michael. Michael is one of my best friends, was my first assistant at Barman, where Barman was maybe like 15 people. At the beginning of my career, I was like going all around Paris and trying to always find unique and special pieces. So basically, I went with him and we found this incredible piece. I loved the mix of history mixed with modernity. In my house, you will see something really modern, the marble, like really futuristic in somehow, but you will see as well the clash with history and past. And this is something that I really love, that kind of tension of two worlds that connect. This palm tree feels like really south of France. It could feel a bit LA, a bit Marrakesh. So I love that kind of feeling and I love bringing that energy in my house. All my friends say, you're crazy, Olivier. You're in the middle of Paris and you want a huge palm tree. I'm like, I have 1,000 square meters. Let's make it happen. I think there was like 25 guys came. There was a huge crane. After they realized the window was too small, we had to break a bit the door because the door was too small as well. But we made it happen. And the good news with this palm tree is that it was big when I got it, but actually it's even way bigger now, which at one point, I don't know if the house is too small. There's only one question. Should I change my space because the palm tree is growing?
In the middle of Paris.
And here you
How
arrive
stunning
to
is this place?
the last floor of my house.
Amazing.
Really important. We should stop here for a couple of reasons, because I have really incredible pictures that I want to talk about. As I told you before, I love my barman memories. One of the first picture, Iman, Naomi, and Rihanna. It was shot with Edward Henningful, I think in 2000, I would say 13 or 14. The photographer was Emma Summerton.
Wow.
We had a really great time. It was, I think, after the Met Gala, one of my first Met Gala, I have to say. And as you can imagine, it was really difficult to have all the three incredible girls together. They are my friends. They have been, from the beginning, a big support. You will see as well Naomi, shot by Stephen Klein. As a kid, I remember like the top model era. And that was something that made me dream about fashion. It was something that I remember when I was a kid and I was reading all those magazines.
He was really a kid because I was in my 20s.
I had this idea. I called
in the top model era.
Like, can we do like a photo shoot with the three top models? And that day was really emotional because seeing the three women together, that was something really special that I would never, ever believe it would happen in my career. I was like, it was a dream of a 12-year-old kid. And growing up as a kid, there's an icon that I love that inspired me so much in my fashion. It's Karl Lagerfeld. I got my first Chanel purse 10 years ago. And I remember the first one was a Chanel No. 5 made for a bag. The last thing that I remember from this bag is that I brought it to go to New York. And I remember like at the airport, they stopped me because they were like, we told you cannot have a fragrance in your bag. And I was like, this is not a fragrance. This is a Chanel bag.
I love that.
Welcome to my living room.
Oh,
this
shoot,
is
I forgot. Damn.
The space that I'm spending the most time in, because as you can see, it's really peaceful. I
forgot my retinol because I leave it in the fridge.
The problem of the couch is how you place the couch. You need to always make sure that people can face each other without feel embarrassing, So I really try to create that kind of space where people can just feel relaxed. Actually, the couch took really long because they're made of velvet. And this is the velvet that I'm using for my ready-to-wear because I'm really like picky on velvet and on black. The color, as you can see, there's a lot of black around me. I'm really picky on the color and the texture. As well, you can see all my pillows as well. Sometimes they are quilted with studs, but they can be leather. They're as well in velvet.
Retinol.
I basically wear black every day. So
2%
sometimes it feels like I'm in a camouflage right now. For me, black is obviously is more than a color. I would say is a lifestyle. I wanted to have a beautiful table made of mirror because if you see, the ceiling is in glass. So basically when you have the blue sky, it completely reflects on the table. You will see a lot of objects from Baccarat, from beginning of the century.
Love
I love the
Baccarat.
kind of like contrast between mirror and glass. You know, I'm come from Bordeaux, the south of France. My parents, when they
Always
come here,
put
whatever,
your
for Christmas or for a birthday party or whatever,
face creams
they always
on your
bring me a
hands.
beautiful red wine, what we call a great millésime. So I'm using them when my parents come usually. If not, you will see as well this beautiful egg made as well of mirror from Christophe. This was a present from Kris Jenner a couple of years ago for my birthday.
You
By the
know
way,
how I
love
feel
Kris.
about Jenner.
I have to say, I love hosting,
Not a fan.
but at the same time, I love so much my
But
privacy.
I know that they
so
love
it's a
Belmont.
bit, I would say, a paradox. I really usually invite really people
I just wish
that
they didn't
I'm
love
really
that other
close to
B
because
brand
my
as
house
much
is so private and it feels like
that
when
we don't discuss
when
on my
people
channel.
discover my house, they know more about me. But I'm really careful to make sure that not everybody knows me and know who I am. There is a really good atmosphere, and if I stay in silence for 1 second, you're in the middle of Paris and there is no noise.
The
And
middle
this
of
is something that
Paris.
I really appreciate. I told you I love my table, but what I love about my table as well is all the objects around. One of my favorites is this backgammon. So this is a game that I learned to play with my best friend. She's from Iran. She's called Tala, and she brought me a couple of years ago this game, and it's like made in Tehran. Always go every summer together, so we play. If you don't know this game, you should definitely learn because it's amazing. This is basically all my summer with my best friend. Ashtray, my God, this ashtray. I mean, the bad thing is that I'm a smoker. The good thing is that I love beautiful ashtrays. I got this from Hermes. I have to say I'm spending
Olivier,
a lot
we
of
have something in
incredible
common.
time at Hermes. My bank account is not really happy with it, but I mean, I am, so it's perfect. And one of the most
I love that.
incredible things that I have in my
Hermes.
house, I know it's gonna sound stupid, but I tell you, it's actually my pen. Because I love sketching during the weekend. So I think it's really important for
Castor
me when I
oil.
go back home. I just feel sometimes more creative. And what I love about my pen is that there's two tips. One is thicker, one is smaller. And I can definitely sketch the way that I want. And I love that. I think the last time that we sketched, I was sketching, it was with Maluma actually. And we start sketching together, actually seated here around next to the fireplace. So I love inviting people at my place and actually sketch with me sometime.
I love designers that can sketch. Not every creative director can sketch. He's an
So when I
artist.
arrived here, the
He's
house was
amazing.
obviously empty. So the first thing that I did was filling it with marble everywhere. My passion. I always loved marble since I'm a kid. You know, I had this obsession when I was like 6, 7 years old. You know, I was just like obsessed with castle, the fabulousness of Versailles, you know, something
When you're poor,
about
you dream
strength
big.
and in somehow power and
Love
really
that
this
about
sense of
him.
rare and luxury. I remember I was telling to my parents, I want more marble in the house. And my parents absolutely have not the same taste that I have. The first time that they came here, they were like, we got you, like when you were a kid and you wanted to have marble around the house. Now, I mean, you made it, your dream happen, you know? So through those doors, you're gonna discover my bedroom. It's really minimal and really simple. What I love the most is my bed, which I sketched with my architect. A bit Japanese inspiration because I really believe, you know, like the fact that the bed is not too high and the mattress is obviously really, really important. It's made of a really dark chocolate suede. I love my bed a lot. I think it's one of my favorite space in my house as well. What I love as well about my bathroom is my bathtub. I usually at night come back home pretty late. The thing that I love the most is actually a warm bath. That's what I do with my masks. You will see as well some glass
It's
in the wall.
so
And when I bought the
Parisian,
house, like
taking a
actually the owner
bath.
told me that it was like a vitrail that belonged to Jimi Hendrix. And to tell you a story that no one knows, after the third visit of this house before buying it, I met the daughter of the owner. And she told me one thing, it was on a Sunday morning. She told me, oh, I was dying to meet you. I had a dream and I would love to share with you. I was like, what is your dream? And she told me, I would love to do a documentary on you. And so this documentary is called Wonder Boy. It's on Netflix, and that's
I
how
gotta go watch
I
that.
built the
Maybe
story.
we'll
She
do it
was,
together, you guys. Let me
the
know in the
director for
comments
my
if you want to
documentary.
do
So
Wonder
when she
Boys
was
together.
coming here and filming me, it was funny because it was her hex house in somehow, you know. So it's I really believe in energy and spirit of a house, and I have to say that the first thing that made me love this house is that I could feel there is a great soul and a great energy here. What I love the most about my kitchen is this table. As you can see, it's like a long table that is floating in the air. If you look at the bottom of the table, you will see that it's like made of glass as well. So it feels like the wood is flying. If you look at around, there is many things that I love about my kitchen that for me is really special. Like that butcher block that is from south of France, the sink coming from south of Italy. I love the spirit of this kitchen because, as you have seen through all my house, there is obviously a lot of object and it's really cold sometimes because there's a lot of marble. But here there is something that feels really warm because it's a lot of wood that you won't find in the house. If you ask me if I know how to cook, I would love to tell you yes, but unfortunately not. But I love trying and I love watching people.
But you're
telling me that I do
Parisian.
something great when I
You
just
should know how to
like,
cook something
this
amazing.
is the best that I can do. But what I know to do really well is my
Okay, my
morning
hands are too greasy to open it.
juices made of carrot, apple, ginger, and some blueberries.
That
I love
sounds
the switches. They're
incredible.
really old as well. And as
I
you
love
can see,
anything with
there's a lot
ginger
of
in it.
fans on the ceiling. But I have to say, I'm really scared to turn them on because I'm scared that they fall. That's the thing. But they're really beautiful. I mean, actually, there are many beautiful things that I'm scared of, but I mean, this is the most important. Is I'm working fashion, so
Okay, I
whatever
can't get it
is.
open. Moving
Fashion is
on.
passion, architecture is beauty. I have one last surprise for you. We're gonna go downstairs.
This is so cool. Look at his pool.
And here we are in my secret garden, Jardin Secret, the pool. Unboxing, as you can see behind me, like unboxing with my personal trainer every morning. You will see as well, there's a little salon where it's all white and really calm, where we can have some drinks. And usually on Sunday, I'm sitting in my couch and read books and just having my cup of tea here and doing my kind of spa session on Sunday. And sometimes it's not so relaxed because I know that I have done really great parties here. Sometimes my after shows come here, like with all my friends.
Oh my God, that would
my
be so
teams, and
amazing.
I would say that it's half-half. Sometimes a lot of silence, sometimes a lot of noise. One of my favorite parties I've done here was after my menswear show, and we came with all my team and all our friends, celebrities, models. Everybody was around the house, and we all end up like throwing each other in the pool until that so many people jump in the pool that my heating system got killed, like literally. But this
I
is
love
okay,
it.
you know, until that we have fun. This is
That's
most
a party
important.
right
And
there.
again, great spirit, great energy. And I have to tell you something. When I come to my pool, I can change the lights. I'm a bit crazy.
That's so
Sometimes I like to
amazing.
have my pool blue. Sometimes I like to have my pool yellow, red, pink, purple. So this is a bit the trick every morning. And I can obviously not decide. So I spend like maybe at least 2 minutes to decide. Hope you enjoyed this little tour in my house. It's, as I told you, it's my secret garden, but I'm super excited for you to discover all my little secrets here. It's a peaceful house, and that's how I start actually to create and having more creativity when I go to my office. So please don't forget to subscribe. Sunday Time Style YouTube channel.
Love it. Love it. That was such a fun video. I mean, I had to include it just here at the end, just because next to McQueen, Olivier is it. I have been following him for so many years, and he just gets better and better each season. If you didn't see when he did the couture collection for Gautier, that was epic. I mean, beyond epic. Anyway, I need to clean this. So I'm going to do one final thing, and that is really my entire skincare routine. Other than the fact I didn't get to use my LED mask, maybe next movie I'll be able to squeeze that in. but after I do the jade roller, then I have this rose quartz roller and I do her. Both of these are in my refrigerator. When I went to go get my retinol, it's in the refrigerator as well. These are ice cold, and they do such an amazing job sinking that moisturizer into the skin without soaking up the product. This is how I finish everything. You know, all that steam opens everything up. This is closing all those pores. So love that. Love that. So we're going to finish up this. And as soon as it is no longer cold, that's when I stop. And then switch it over to the little side for the eyes and nose. That is still ice cold. Closing up all the pores. Get those 11s. If you're over 50. Actually, if you're over 30, you know. So we're just going to do that. Then go over the nose. And that is going to do it for skincare tonight. All right. I hope you guys really had fun with me. I really enjoyed doing this movie night. If it gets a lot of views, if it gets a lot of comments, I will continue this on Saturday evenings, or if you want it on a different evening, just leave a comment and let me know. Oh, one more thing, one final product for tonight is my Aquaphor. I swear by it. I use it every single night on my hands. And they are so dry and dehydrated right now because I was out of it for about a week. So my hands are ridiculously dry. Anyway, I really hope you guys enjoyed movie night. If it is something that you like, we will continue finding new designers to cover. Even in just tonight's video, I realized I want to do Philip Treacy, I want to do Jeremy Scott, I want to do Tom Ford. So if I can find those videos, I certainly would like to bring all those to you. And yeah, just leave a comment and let me know. Is Friday night better? Is Saturday night better? I would love to know your thoughts. Thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Enjoy your skincare evening. Go finish your glass of wine because I know I'm going to. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. You know, I got to do my whole StreamYard thing. I'm still learning.